Good morning, everyone. Welcome back into Betsperts Golf here for our first look at the FedEx Cup playoffs. We are here for the TPC Southwind St. Jude, coming off of a wild weekend, I guess a wild Sunday of golf in particular at Sedgefield there in Greensboro. Joined here as always by my guy, Ron Kloss, PGA Splits 101. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, yeah, it was interesting week of golf for sure. Obviously, we had a lot of weather issues, a lot of golf played yesterday. Matt Kuchar got his par today, so that's good for him, I guess. Yeah, we're headed down the final stretch here, and people have opinions on the playoffs, and obviously, interest with football kind of waning a little bit. So yeah, we'll try to bring some good takes here today.
Yeah, congrats to Kuchar. I mean, he got his par. Good for him. If you did not see that somehow in the last 12 hours or so, I guess wild to have to jam in the back end of round 2, all of round 3 and all of round 4 to get all of that golf in, because obviously to have it Thursday completely rained out, which is somewhat unprecedented. We don't typically see that. For Kuchar to try to make, I guess, somewhat of a stance to say pace of play is a problem. We shouldn't have been out here. It's dark. He was trying to, I guess, cape up a little bit for Max Gracerman, who was in his group, who, I don't know if he thought that there were visibility issues. There were definitely a pace of play issues. There's definitely some guys out there ahead of them. And Aaron Rai in particular, the winner, they talk about on the broadcast, and they say it in a way that's almost giving him applauding his consistency around what he does, regardless of if it's a 40-foot putt or a 5-foot putt. His process is the same. That's great. It's obviously serving him well. He's playing the best golf of his career. There's also something to be said for how insufferable 5.5-hour rounds of golf are. Even at the tour level, should not be the case. And for Kuchar to try to draw a line in the sand, I guess, based off of what he's saying. I have not read the apology. I believe he's just finished and just talked about it a little bit. But make the stand earlier, do it at 15 or 16, where you're not the only guy that didn't finish, your entire playing group finished. Just kind of a very weird tone deaf thing to take into consideration all that had to be done by the people to get that course up and running. It's just a normal tour event, right? I was out there this week. You've had the ability to be out there, multiple times. When you're out there early in the week, you see all that goes on to produce a tournament, all of the television production and all of the grandstand building and everything to make sure that there's everything that makes an event go off without, us knowing that has to get done. That there's so much work that goes off. And then people had to come back. Not everyone had to come back this morning, but a lot of people had to come back today that would not have had to come back or came back earlier because he made that decision. It's just kind of it's really hard to justify it or excuse it. So, but kudos to everyone out there at Sedgefield to get that off the ground and make sure that happened, and that, that we can have tour level golf for 4 rounds, even though it was only really basically 2 days.
Yeah. And, let's not forget about Aaron Rai. I said this on the DFS show a couple of times, when he made the switch, he started working with putting coach John Graham, and we saw an immediate change. He's always been, I would say, even this year, top 10 ball striker on the PGA Tour. His ball striking is just automatic, and you see what he's done with the putter. Gaining, just looking back, over 4.5, 5 strokes last week again. And so when he has this putting stroke down, I mean, you look at his finish positions, it's staggering. Along with the win, 4th, 7th, 2nd, this is all in the past, 6 weeks. And so just interesting to see what kind of trajectory he can really take off on now.
Yeah, no, kudos to him getting his first PGA Tour win. I don't want to take away from him because of the pace of play situation, but awesome golf. And as you laid it out there too, consistent. He's just been in the mix. And I know some people got some really good numbers. Kudos to everyone who got 40s on Rye. That was great. I know I saw early, looking at 25. It was tough because I was traveling Monday morning when the books typically open, and we, was not in the legal state at the time and saw some stuff that I wanted to get on and couldn't, and really was stuck there a little bit. But so people did get some really nice numbers on him. 25 was out there pretty early Monday afternoon too. It's a little hard to jump on considering that he had never won, but he's just continuing to almost like think about Xander in a way, right? It's almost like a small version of Xander, right? He doesn't have the pedigree of Xander. I don't want to make the comp of them as players, but like Xander just knocking on the door, always in the mix, always around. At a certain point, these guys that sometimes like people have trouble betting on because they're like, oh, he never wins. It's like there are 156 guys teeing it up in a lot of these events, right? This week is 70. A lot of weeks though we have full field events, 144, 156. Like it is hard to win a golf tournament. But if you continue to play consistent golf, right? Worry about the things that we can kind of measure that are controllable, right? How often are you gaining strokes, tee to green? Are you putting yourself in position on Sundays to be in the top 10, to be in the top 20? Eventually, guys are going to break through. It is just very difficult to win on the PGA Tour. So that stuff's always a little bit noisy to me. So kudos to Rye, again, putting himself in that position too. I want to share some takeaways that I had from the week too. I was out there Tuesday and Wednesday, wanted to take advantage of that too. And obviously, Ron and I talked about it a little bit, and we spent so much time in data. The entirety of the rest of the show will be data driven around strokes gains analysis, current form, all of the things that are captured in there. And I was really fascinated by what do the players think of this? This has been kind of a new wave in the last 8 years or so, really, with strokes gain data. And, I think you definitely have a line of demarcation in terms of like older guys and younger guys in terms of how much they are really getting in the weeds on some of this stuff. You can't go to the driving range, watch a tour driving range session without seeing literally everyone with the TrackMan, right? They are all capturing ball speed, spin rates, launch angles, all of that. But then how much are these guys really getting involved in like strokes gain data? How much are they like them or their teams analyzing some of this stuff? And it was really fascinating to hear like a Lucas Glover, a little bit older, who could not give a rip about any of it. Just almost like laughing at the thought that like, I would never not go to tee it up at a course because I couldn't put on Bermuda greens. Like, just very much old school. Like, and I get that. Like, I'm not suggesting that you wouldn't go to an event because of green surface per se, but Spieth talking about his team is looking at strokes gain less than driver. Because that's, and that's something again that we have unique here on the rabbit hole, to be able to say, hey, look, this is a unique kind of layout. This is asking me to do something that's a little bit different. How do I perform in those instances? Looking at those things, a lot of guys think putting splits on surfaces are completely noisy, and that's interesting to me. Right, it's definitely something that is part of our process. We're on Bermuda greens here in Southwind again. We're going to look at that this week. My pushback is whether they think it matters or not. I think on the tails of any data set, like it matters. I think when there's like in the middle of it, you probably get some small sample noise, even with probably a big sample. It's probably a little bit noisy, but if you are way above or way below your baseline on a putting surface, whether you think it matters or not, I think our data would tell you that it does matter. And now it's just interesting to see like a younger guy like Akshay, who's like, yeah, I'm all in it. My team look at it, it's a big process, part of our process. Like I want to learn where I'm doing well, how I can highlight my strengths, how I can try to strengthen my weaknesses. Really fascinating stuff as a takeaway. Shane Lowry was interesting because he's like, I used to walk off the course and look like, what were my strokes gains for the day? And that became almost like a negative effect for him. And then you kind of dial it back and his team kind of looks at it and they like filter through what they need to work on based on what he's doing, and he doesn't see it directly. So very, very interesting to me to get some of that information, because obviously, Ron, we spend, we make our hay in our living in that data, and I'm just so fascinated to hear what those guys think about it.
Yeah, I think just like in any sport, you have your group of old school guys who are, going to kind of diminish it, and they want to rely on just, feel. And, you see this with every sport, people who look at data, and you just have, players, even some, analysts who look at it, even, certain golf analysts who still, are in the GIR stuff. So Yeah, I think, Lucas Glover, that makes a lot of sense to me. That's kind of his personality. But
Mhm.
and so many of these guys have their own data people that they kind of rely on them for, they read the reports and stuff before the tournament starts. And they just don't want to get into the weeds too much, because there's enough to think about, with your swing and all this other stuff. So I can see it from that perspective as well. But no, I agree with you completely. Like for us, I think we can see, we can see visually because we're looking at it all the time, but we can kind of tell how important it is.
Yeah, it was a very interesting learning takeaway for me, but because I'm just curious, and it kind of became evident early in the week as more people I talked to that it was this is almost an age thing a little bit. Like there's very much a feel, even with their teams, like having the teams take a look at it. So really interesting stuff. Obviously, we'll continue on as Ron said. We're getting into playoff season here. Unique, people will poo-poo on the playoffs here for golf. I think it's really hard to do playoffs that are fair. But I guess I would say that I'm in the camp that likes the current setup. I'm open to hearing someone come out. Like, don't be someone that just bitches about the current setup and offers no suggestion on how to improve it. Like the playoffs are stupid. Well, what would you do? Well, I don't know. Like, okay, like don't be that guy. Like show up with, not that you would have the ability to do it, but like, hey, things change. This changed. It's different than it used to be. Having, one champion from the tour championship versus a winner of the event and a winner of points. Like, I think it is an interesting thing. Going down now to 70 and then obviously to 50 next week in Colorado and then 30 as we go to the tour championship in Atlanta. What's important to know that golf will still be a massive part of what you want. If you want to get it, it's going to be still here all off season in terms of, swing season stuff, still consistently here at Betsperts Golf. The show schedule changes a little bit, content schedule changes a little bit, but Ron in particular is still driving the cart here. It will be continuing to tweak and make improvements to the rabbit hole, bringing you content, picks, DFS, all that stuff for every tournament. That again, there's some like Hero World Challenge and some like different stuff that like we don't get into that sometimes we can't even bet on. But any main event here, all off season, we will still be covering golf here for you at Betsperts Golf. So jump in if you haven't taken advantage. Get a monthly sub. Check us out to get into the rabbit hole and ride the wave here to the end for the playoffs. We'll get started with some analysis here on TPC Southwind. Some corollary run to what we've seen again, and maybe what we saw last week at Sedgefield. Shorter course. We're in the Southeast. We're in Tennessee. We're just outside of Memphis. A lot of water in play. Positional golf off the tee. We do have Zoysia grass fairways. Just really nice. Tease it up a little bit softer for those guys if you can manage to keep it in. Smaller greens. Interesting event. It's been here. This has not been like. Be careful if you're looking at like FedEx Cup St. Jude course history because we've only had a couple years of that here. But we've been coming here to Southwind for a handful of years, a long time.
So if you go to the rabbit hole, we're speaking of that. For the last 5 years, it's been kind of a FedEx St. Jude, kind of playoff, no cut event, World Golf Challenge, that kind of series. So, and then before that, you had the St. Jude Classic, which was kind of a full field, 156 players. But yeah, if you kind of look back and like you said, you talked about a lot of the course features, but it's a par 70. So we only have 2 par 5s again this week. But just looking at some of the past winners on this course, even the last 5 years, I mean, you're talking about some pretty good ball strikers. When you get into, even last year, Lucas Glover, Abe Answer, Justin Thomas, Will Zalatoris, Brooks Koepka, and even going back to when it was the St. Jude Classic played here, Daniel Berger wins twice, Dustin Johnson. So some pretty big names and guys who are just really good, kind of tee to green, but mostly, off the tee and mostly on approach here. So like you said, you have tons of water balls here, actually the most total water balls on tour. Bermuda, I think the Bermuda rough is a huge factor here. Just kind of getting into some of the player quotes, talking about this course, kind of the biggest defense is the Tangley Bermuda. It's only 2.5 inches, but, anyone who's played in Bermuda rough can, has that experience of, you got to be really experienced in, kind of knowing how to get the ball out of there, whether you're chipping, whether you're trying to hit the green, from 150 yards away. So I think that kind of brings its own challenges that certain players, going back to the data here, kind of, whether certain guys grew up in the South or guys who just have a lot of experience on courses like this, I think are going to have an advantage here.
Yep. Looking right now, this is our over the last 5 years, looking at course history from a strokes gain standpoint over at TPC Southwind. You can see obviously small sample for some guys. 5 years, we're not getting everyone for the full 5. You can go ahead and take a look at that here as well. One other thing Ron mentioned, I think is really interesting too. Obviously, there are going to be some differences when you sweep broadly in terms of like region, but there are some commonalities if you are to look just at some stuff in terms of the Southeast and guys who have played really well down here. And again, that could be a mix of stuff too, depending on where in the season the event is, and obviously some similarities in terms of grass types and stuff like that, more so than course structure. You probably wouldn't want to go last 5 years. It's a pretty big sample. You just want to see you play some good golf in the Southeast in the last calendar year. Hey, look, good golfers. Xander, Scotty, Ludwig, Rory, Decky there at the top. You start to see some names maybe you want to dig in a little bit further into to see if there's something there. But interesting to obviously all these different avenues, not things that we look at every week when we share the rabbit hole, but definitely something that you can do here, looking at specific course, looking at corollary courses. Ron's preview on the site lists all of the corollary courses too, if you want to go ahead and dig further into those. But the Southeast thing is definitely something that I think is a little bit relevant there as well. So, obviously, 70, no cut, unique in terms of what we have here with the playoffs here. So brings into a little bit of a different type of handicap. Guys are obviously jockeying for position here. It's getting in the playoffs is great, but in terms of what this does for guys, especially the tail end of this 70, getting these guys into the top 50 and what it opens up for you in terms of eligibility for next year is really, really important. How you interpret that and bring it into a handicap, that's really hard. Similar to last week, like what do you make of, all right, I got to get into the top 70. Like it's really hard to add that level of analysis into a handicap, but it's just something to note. Like these guys getting into the top 50 is really, really, really important here. Any other course facts or features or anything we need to know about Southwind before we dig into modeling a little bit here, Ron?
No, I mean, I think we covered it. I think the Bermuda, the rough, it's not really when we get into off the tee, driver usage is at about 73%, which is just slightly more than average. So I wouldn't favor anything as far as less than driver or, driver heavy, kind of right in the middle there. And just overall, when you look at the strokes gained, how easy from, it's pretty much kind of in the middle of the pack. So this is a week where it's, for me at least, there are some things like I'm going to dig into, like you said, with Southeast, with Bermuda, grass. Even we have a feature in the filter by conditions where you can just look at FedEx playoff history. And so, that kind of covers guys who, I don't know how relevant that is or how much emphasis you'd want to put on that, but just, just having that option available where you can, this guy's been really good in the playoffs. So that's another interesting take. But for me, it's going to be more of kind of a bland, middle of the road. We're kind of looking at the big picture type of modeling week.
Yeah. Just if you're watching on YouTube, check out that. You can see right there. That is your FedEx Cup playoff strokes gained rankings over the last 5 years. So I'm kind of with Ron there. Like, it's not something that I would, add to model. But again, part of it is the rabbit hole piece of it. You look at it. It's like, all right, maybe I need to look at EVR a little bit. Like, is there something there? As he start to play his best golf at this time of year, more so than anything else, small sample of rounds as well. But again, just something that can maybe lead you to digging a little bit deeper. All right, we'll start at the very, very top. Obviously, you want to take a look at some guys that are playing their best golf currently. Again, we're defaulting here the last 6 months strokes gained total. It's got to be, again, it's the big three-ish of Rory's played some really good golf, but it's hard not to think that Scotty and Xander have separated themselves a little bit. And Rory, you wouldn't think necessarily, again, a place where it's not relying on a ton of driver. Rory played really well here last year, was in the mix a little bit in terms of like your approach buckets. You got a lot of approaches in the 100 to 200 range, about 75. So you don't have a lot of long approaches, not a lot of short wedges stuff. You are going to miss greens. So around the green, I think is going to be something we need to look at here, because these are pretty small green complexes for these guys. That also does, I think, typically make putting a little bit more like something that we wouldn't weigh too much. Would you agree with that? Just because the greens, just you're gonna have less long lag putts.
Yeah, we're looking at 4,300 square feet. So these are the third smallest greens on tour. And so, yeah, GIR is only, right around 63%. So, yeah, guys are going to miss greens. And that's where the Bermuda rough, the challenge comes in, chipping. But, yeah, you're just not going to get those massive, long, 50, 60-foot putts here. So I do think, that is going to make, and that is why when you look at the putting splits, I mean, pretty much every single one is easier than average here.
Yep. I think we are still, I think because of Kuchar, we are still waiting for our, oh no, look, we're in here. We got all of our Wyndham data. Look at that. We're on the ball this morning. Wyndham data already in the rabbit hole. So that's great. I was going to say, I think we're waiting on the Wyndham data because of everything that happened this morning with Cooch, but sweet. Wyndham data already good to go. Love that.
Yeah. I think we're the only site too. So just FYI.
Look at that. Feather in our cap. All right. So this is, just looking here, recent form. And this is to Ron's point, like, Aaron Rai, last 36 rounds played on tour, 5th in total strokes. And then look at this. There's just no like problem areas, right? He's just been so consistent off the tee. He's going to get dinged sometimes, I think, for lack of distance, but he's just been playing such good golf. Just real consistent golf.
And go to his player page really quick and just and so when you look at his finish summary, so as you go down there and just look at his putting, where it's come from, so you can see, go back up one to the summary right above it. Yeah, and so you can see, where he's come from, in the negative, and just complete turnaround.
Absolutely dialed in, gaining almost a stroke per round over the last 24 rounds. That's going to get it done when you are, pretty consistently gaining tee to green as well, and ball striking. I mean, it's awesome stuff. Just consistently in the mix, just for basically all summer. He's just been kind of hovering around. I mean, this is what this early stuff was Aaron Rai of the past. Still, like, you can get him on the right course. He'd be in the mix. He'd be a top 20, top 40 bat, a decent price. He could show up at the right spot and get it done. Then all of a sudden you just kind of see, flip a switch, and is just, showing up, competing T40s, T20s at majors. Obviously the Open Championship was not great for him, but weather was a beast there too, and that could be just a data set that we would love to wipe off because it was so impactful in terms of, depending on where you were in the wave. But just awesome to see him playing really, really good golf, and not a name you'd expect to see over the last 36 rounds that he'd be inside the top 5, because really Morikawa is the next one. That's really interesting because, touched on just knocking on the door almost every time you start and not winning. And people want to tell you can't win. And he hasn't won. He's won in a long time. But to tell me that he's going to play this well consistently and not be able to win, is just a bridge too far for me. I can't get there. Now the price is prohibitive. You're paying for a guy as if he's won a bunch, which is obviously a betting decision. But there's no reason to think that Collin Morikawa cannot win because he has not won in a little bit. So this is a 2-time major champion who is just playing consistently good golf. But yeah, let's take the odds board real quick. Looking at our friends over at FanDuel. Again, shop around. Odds are moving and being bet into. Scotty, Xander at the top. Rory just a little bit behind. You can see there, Colin, somewhat of their own tier. I mean, you can make a case again. Scotty's in his own, rightfully so. But Colin, again, that kind of short of 20. Ludwig, Cantley, Tommy, Hideki, 30 or shorter. Hovland, Tom Kim, Tony Finau, they're short of 40. And then you start to get into a bigger range there into the 40s with JT, who's nice course history here. Connors, Henley, Horschel, Sanjay, those guys have been playing really good golf of late. Sahith there in the mix. Aaron Rai there now put himself in the mix there as well, short of 50. And then you get into a little bit longer. And then we're going to get off a cliff. I mean, some really good golfers down here into the close to 100 range because, look, you have to start to balance it out a little bit when you have three guys sub 10, even in a short man fields. And again, like, let's remember, Lucas Glover won here last year. Scotty's not starting with an advantage this week. Scotty starts with an advantage at the Tour Championship. We are starting even this week. So, don't be afraid to shop down here a little bit. If you are, you see a name that makes sense and we do some modeling and someone that kind of catches your eye, don't be afraid to jump down here a little bit. So, what do we want to look at, Ron? I want to go off the board a little bit in terms of, how we want to look at the condition section, how we want to look at some unique filters here for Southwind.
Yeah, so for me, I'm heavy into the Bermuda narrative this week. So one thing I'm going to do is even off the tee, I'm going to go to so good drive percentage. Obviously, when you're able to hit the green, no matter kind of where you hit your tee shot, and so that kind of covers guys who can hit the green who are approaching from the rough. And so in the filter by condition menu, I'm going to do a number of these where I have Bermuda selected for the rough. And so that's going to kind of cover, all these different courses they play with Bermuda. And I'm going to look at good drive percentage from the rough with that filter on. And I'm going to do the same when I get to around the green. I'm going to have that Bermuda rough filter selected and just kind of see which guys kind of pop. I think both of those metrics, good drive percentage and around the green. And if you want to look at scrambling, that's fine too. But I think that kind of gives a good idea of, guys who can kind of rise above and who have shown that in the past on Bermuda.
I like it. This is just looking at the last 12 months, all rounds played with rough service Bermuda. You're going to see a mix of sample size, but again, good drives. I think Ron's point there in terms of that mattering is pretty impactful here. Very unique nature of grabby Bermuda there. Shane Lowry, small sample of data at the top. Aaron Rai, Akshay, Brendan Todd, Ludwig there, which is again pretty, I'd say surprising, but again, like we're just got a year of Ludwig and he's still just consistently at the top and a lot of things. Just there's going to be a breaking point with him. I think he just starts to win and becomes a real problem. These even 20s on Ludwig and like low 20s probably dissipate. Alex Noren here in the mix. Steven Yeager, which is interesting to see. Distance from the edge of the fairway, not Yeager's strength, but can get it out there quite a bit. Morikawa, Pendrith, and Russell Henley. Again, Georgia Bulldog, Southeast, definitely a massive part of his success here too. So that's definitely interesting to see. I'll take a look at that. We'll kind of make a little sub-model. Good drives. Bermuda. You can take a look at some other stuff here. What else do you said you want to look at off with Bermuda just while I have this filter on? Some approach stuff?
Yeah, not as much approach, but around the green. So whether you want to look at around the green or scrambling with the Bermuda filter on, I think that is obviously something that's going to come into play this week, especially with smaller greens.
Yeah, because they're small. Scrambling, obviously taking into consideration the putting element of it too, which is interesting to see where the gap is there, right? You could see, like for instance, Chris Kirk's going to make up for a lot of that with his putter. The inverse, you're probably going to see Tony Finau here, would be my guess. Hideki, putting himself in position scrambling wise on the Bermuda, putting a little less strong. Yeah, there's Finau. Again, just real solid, putting himself in position. The putter has just been pretty devastating for most of the year. It's been a little bit better of late. I could make the same case for Justin Thomas here. So I like to see that too when you're looking at these, considering these stats, right? When Ron says either around the green or scrambling, I like to see where there's a gap between these two things and why that is, right? Some guys are going to maybe not be as strong from a scrambling standpoint, but they can save themselves with the putter, or vice versa. So I just like to look at those things. Same thing when we look at like distance from the edge of the fairway and driving accuracy. Like I like to look at both. I want to see who's still putting themselves in the fairway more often than not, but who is really just kind of getting penalized more for bigger misses. And when you have a spot where there's a lot of water damage off the tee or on approach, like that tells us, I think, an important story with what we're trying to look for at the data here.
Yeah, and no, I was going to say, speaking of water, because you brought that up, and that's something I'm going to look at as well. So we have a water filter. So high water danger this week is something that's going to be key. And so I think we did this a few weeks ago with, maybe it was the 3M, but I will go to the filter menu and put that water danger filter on high, and specifically look at ball striking, because there's a lot of, obviously, off the tee approaching the greens, and so I'll look at just ball striking on holes with water danger, and it's a decent sample. And I'll also look, after you do this one, I'll look at bogey avoidance, and so I think both of these kind of are the most important ones to capture when you have a lot of water in play. Looking at those two.
Yeah, love it. Love the ball striking way to look at it. These are the guys that are getting themselves in trouble in this situation too, which I think is interesting to look at, the inverse of that. So add ball striking, high water danger, and then we'll look at, while we have this filter on, so we'll go into scoring and look at the bogey avoidance. And we can see here last couple of years too. You can see small sample for Max Grayserman, but then for the most part, these guys make sense here. Finau being up here is interesting. You'd consider the putting would be typically a problem for him, but again, the ball striking is so good that doesn't make quite as many. You can see some good putters here too that can make some bogeys, because the rest of the game isn't quite as strong. But again, we have the filter on with the high water danger. Bogey avoidance. All right. Yeah, I like looking at, just kind of like a unique little, this wouldn't necessarily be our normal full model that we would use, but just kind of looking at some of the unique filters and things that are relevant to what we have here at Southwind, I think is an interesting little process to do it.
Yeah, and so on approach, we know there's another one we can look at. So obviously greens, very small, 4,300 square feet on average. So I will go to the small green filter and look at approach. And this is one for me, I would broaden this one out to 3 years, because I don't know how much sample you're going to get from a year. And there you see quite a bit. So, if you want to, you can play around with that too. You can go 2 years, you can go 1 year, whatever you feel comfortable with. But yeah, I guess pretty good sample here. So I'll look at approach here, and then I'll go just strictly short term. I'll go last 16 rounds just to get a feel for who's really hot on approach recently, because I think that's obviously something that typically carries over.
Yep. Yeah, I like looking at approach buckets for sure, like recent form, like real recent, like whether it's 12, 24, 16, 36, and then something longer that's going to get you some baseline stuff too. And then depending on how you weigh it, I think is important too. But again, that I think that definitely matters here too. But just looking at small greens, and you want to see what those rounds are, what's classified as a small green, you can click on this little blue number here right next to the approach bucket. It'll take you to that player's page to see what those rounds are with these small greens. So this will tell you that we had small greens at Travelers, the US Open, Memorial, Schwab. It'll take you all the way back for the sample that you were in. So if you ever want to know what those ones were, and how they did specifically, you can get all that information by clicking on that too. Click on their name, it'll take you specifically to their player page as well, like we did with Aaron Rye. If you want to jump in and get kind of a broad overview of the player, their recent form, finishing positions, all those different things, you can click on the player's name. Yeah, small greens, Scotty, Tony, Xander, Ludwig. Then you get into some of the other names. You get into Hoagie, Harmon, JT, Rye, Sepp, Corey Connors, kind of rounding out the top 10, which is interesting to see there too. So small greens. You also have Zoysia fairways, which I think are somewhat unique as well. We don't get that often. I do think we'll get that more when we start to see some like renos over the next handful of years. I think you'll start to see more places make a Zoysia switch, just because of the ability to like take care of it is a little bit easier. 2 small greens approach. But yeah, I think that's going to be a thing that we're going to see a little bit here over the next handful of years, 10 or so years, when we start to see more courses get, facelifts or stuff. So let's just take a look here. What do we have? Fairway surface, Zoysia. Let's see what we get here. Obviously, we get that down in Atlanta. You click into Jason Day here. Get a little bit of feedback on what we're looking at. And again, smaller sample there. But again, PGA Championship, we had that when they, again, another example of a renovation. They put Zoysia in, CJ Cup, and then, St. Jude and Tour Championship. So a spread out sample. You probably want to make that a little bit bigger, but just to see who plays well in that when that's the ask, because it is unique. See Victor, Xander, Zalatoris, small sample, but he's played well. Colin, Finau, Hideki, Straka again, Akshay, Harris English, Scotty Scheffler a little bit further down there. So definitely interesting to see what happens with the Zoysia surface. We'll go approach. Sure, we're definitely again just kind of we'll build this model a little wonky, but just to show you some of the unique ways that you can use the rabbit hole that you can't use anywhere else, that you can be able to play around with stuff and get some stuff that are unique to the course and the test that these guys have in front of them this week. Should we look at Bermuda putting?
Yeah, I've got 3 more. So Bermuda putting would be one of them. Again, not something I'm going to weigh super heavily this week. I think this is definitely more of a tee to green challenge. So Bermuda putting, and then just birdie or better percentage. I think, just to capture some of the scoring. And then the third and final one, par 70 course, only 2 par 5s. You have par 4 scoring going to be more emphasized this week. So I'll look at par 4 birdie or better percentage as well.
All right. Birdie or better last 6 months. We'll go par 4 scoring. You want to do birdie or better in that?
Yeah, I think that kind of captures some of the scoring as well. And so again, the only site that has, we have par 3, 4, 5 birdie or better as well. So I think interesting week to look at this.
Yep. And then we will go. I agree with you. And again, that's an interesting thought. Kind of everyone talked about that the putting services were a little bit noisy statistically. So on events where I want to weigh putting moving forward, I'm probably going to do something similar with what we do with approach. Though I'm obviously weighed far less across the board, I'd probably look at just recent form putting and then add whatever the surface is as well. So I would look at something like, who's putting well over the last 16 rounds, who's putting well over the last 36 rounds, and then who's putting well on that surface, something like that, for example. And then, just if I want to collectively weigh putting like, 5%, 10%, I would just kind of mess around with the buckets of the weights there a little bit. Cause I think there probably is something to that. If you feel like you're rolling it pretty well, it's easier probably for you to make a grass type adjustment. Well, I agree too that, at the tails where the data really matters, I do think it does matter how you perform on a certain surface from a really good or really bad standpoint relative to your baseline. So we are putting. I'm going to add the green surface of Bermuda, and we'll see who is putting well there. The last 6 months, I'm going to bump this back up a little bit. Get a worthwhile sample. Harris English, Matt McNeely, Ben Griffin, Eric Cole, Max Gracerman, Sam Burns, Taylor Moore, Mac Hughes, Ludwig Oberg, and Matthew Pavon. Interesting. All right. Those are your Bermuda All-Stars. Let's see what our unique little model brings us here, Ron. Create mixed condition model. Do first look south wind. Again, a little bit different than we usually do it, but I like to keep it fresh. Again, very unique things this week. We don't have a lot of like baseline performance. This is kind of just, unique little splits here. Let's see. We probably don't want to weigh putting too much, so we'll drop that down a little bit. I think I'm going to give the approach on the Zoysia a little bit less. We'll steal from a few places and then bump up a little bit too. I did 2 around the green. I did the around the green Bermuda and then around the green scrambling, because we were talking about both of them. So we have a little bit more to play with. We can add back into, let's see, we give small greens a little bit of a bump. We will look at ball striking, high water danger. We'll give that a bigger bump. We can give this par 5 or par 4 or overall. Let's go overall birdie. Again, you can mess around with it for the sake of the show. Just knock this out here for you. Let's see what we got. Again, unique features to TBC Southwind. No cut, 70-man fields, and Scotty still comes out on top. Scotty, Ludwig, Fina, Shane Lowry, Rory. Sander takes a hit a little bit there, lower than you would expect. Aaron Ryan in the mix. Victor Hovland, 8. Brian Harmon, 9. Colin Morikawa, 10. Interesting to see there too. Some other names I think will be popular this week that make a lot of sense here. Rounding out your top 20. Let's see who was at the back end of this list. Some guys at the back end of the field, probably Peter Malnati, Thomas Dietrich, Justin Rose, Minwoo Lee, Adam Scott, Taylor Moore. I think Taylor Moore's played well here a couple times. He's so hard. I feel like Taylor Moore's a guy that I think he's pretty good. I just never know why or when he's going to be good. But courses don't really seem to matter. Accuracy needs to be an important thing. Yeah, he shows up and does really well at Harbor Town. I mean, he just played really well here last year. I think he's just an interesting guy. He's probably just a form guy. We'd have to look into just when is he playing well or regardless of anything else. Pavon, Jake Knapp, Seamus, Nick Dunlap, JT Post in there kind of rounds out the back end. So any takeaways here, Ron, from what we get from our little model?
Yeah, like you said, Taylor Moore was 5th here last year, so he does tend to pop on certain courses, but they don't often correlate to each other. So I agree with you; he is tough to figure out. But no, you captured it pretty well with what you said. This is the beauty of the rabbit hole. If you want to take a completely unique approach, and you could run a basic model where you get more of the stroke gain approach off the tee, and get more typical splits, or you could build a second one like this and just kind of see, okay, who's popping in both. And so, that's why this was created. So, you could take, different routes of research and get, as far down into these holes as you want to get into. And so, I think it's interesting. We see Aaron Rai kind of, making that move. These are elite golfers, and, you see him in the middle of everything now. So I think that's pretty interesting. And I think Tony Finau being that high, I think he's on the verge. His ball striking has just been so good, and he's always been good around the green. And so, it's just kind of one of those things. If he can get the flat stick, like you said, can get it going, that's going to be key. So, and we do see a little bit of improvement recently. He was really bad, earlier in the year. And so you kind of see that in the results, 12th, 5th, 3rd. So this is almost like Aaron Rai looked before he won. So really interesting to see, maybe this is Tony's week.
Yeah. So I was on Tony heading into the Open because this string of finishes leading into it, T18, T17, T8, T3, T5. And this is right here. Something happened, right? It feels like when you're looking at this little pop of the putting, because it had been just so bad for a little bit there. It was just seemed to be completely lost. Now, again, I think he got in the wrong side of things. Actually had a really nice opening round at the Open Championship and then really struggled in the weather in the second day and derailed the entire thing. And get why he was a popular ad and people went back the next time out at the 3M. But what was interesting to see is that he still putted well, which is really nice to see. So if you definitely feel like it, that is a little bit encouraging because, again, the putting was so poor. Again, it looks like the driver has gone the other way too. So that's definitely something to watch here in terms of what's happened of late to Tony. Definitely a name that is of interest to me this week, just looking at stuff early. But to Ron's point, you can run this. You can download any of these little models or any of these subsets into a CSV. If you like to play around on an Excel and combine them and weigh them differently and do different things. You could build the baseline model like Ron said. The CSV option is here for a reason. You could also go into the View Expert Rankings tab and you could see anything that we're doing. I have one that I built this morning before the show. You can see Matt Vicenzi, Tap It In podcast. You see Andy Lack of Inside Golf Podcast. You want to see what their models are? what stats they've added. You'll have Ron's later in the week. Our guy Andy Molitor will have his here as well. Look, you just help make some decisions and things that you want to add to your data set that maybe you weren't thinking of that we added that make more sense to you as you start to kind of build your own. This is definitely a lead a horse to water kind of a project for us. We want to be able to give you the data that's available from the PGA Tour and put filters and conditions on that we think are relevant to what the ask is of the course this week and what the golfers are going to have ahead of them. And that's what we're doing here. And again, you can wisdom of the crowd, like take a look at some stuff and see what else that we're adding. There might be some commonalities that, that Ron and I have that maybe you didn't have, and maybe you need to go back in and add those stats to your model and help you make some decisions. DFS, player pool, betting card, all that stuff. So good stuff as always, Ron. Really appreciate walking through. Again, just, Ron does a good job going on the fly with me. We never know where the show is going to go, what we're going to do. Figure it on the fly, we make it work. And again, wanted to show some unique features of what we have in the rabbit hole that I think you can't really do anywhere else, which is why we think you should join us. So subscribe, betspertsgolf.com. You can get Ron's preview up on the site already for Southwind. Again, the best preview you can find on the site or on the internet. Has everything you will need, course history, player quotes, details that you will not find anywhere. Subscription gets you access to our Discord as well. So you want all of Ron's plays, all of Ron's submodels that he does each week, his player pool for DFS, his ownership projections, all that stuff with the subscription to Betsperts Golf. So good stuff as always, Ron. Appreciate it. And we'll come back on Tuesday, tomorrow for the betting show, Wednesday for Ron and Byron on the DFS show. And appreciate it again. We're not going away. Golf is slowing down, but it's not slow down here on Betsperts Golf.